Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, my name is Nabila Adinda Wulandari. I'm from class 5A English Education Department. Today, I will explain about interview. So, let's enjoy the video. According to Wood in 1977, lucidly contrasts three conceptions of an interview. The first conception is that of a potential means of pure information transfers. He explained that if the interviewer does his job well and if the respondent is sincere and well motivated, accurate data may be obtained. A second conception of the interview is that of a transaction which inevitably has bias that needs to be recognized as controlled. According to the viewpoint, Kitwood in 1977 explained that each participant in an interview will define the situation in a particular way. This fact can be best handled by building control into the research design. And the third is conception of the interview sees it as an encounter necessarily, sharing many of the features of everyday life. Kitwood in 1977 suggests that what is required according to this view is not a technique for dealing with bias, but a theory of everyday life that takes account of the relevant feature of the interview. This might include role-playing, stereotyping, perception, and understanding. 5 of the unavoidable features of the interview situation that would normally be regarded as problematic. The first, there are many factors which inevitably differ from one interview to another, such as mutual trust, social distance, and the interviewer's control. The second is the respondent might well feel uneasy and adopt avoidance tactic if the questioning is too deep. And the third, both interviewers and respondent are bound to hold back part of what it is in their power to state. The fourth, many of the meanings that are clear to one will be relatively opaque to the other, even when the intention is genuine communication. And the last, it is impossible, just as in everyday life, to bring every aspect to the encounter within the rational control. Purposes of the interview. The first, to evaluate or assess person in some respect. The second, to select or promote an employee. The third, to effect a therapeutic change as the psychiatric interview. The fourth, to test or develop hypotheses. The fifth, to gather data as in survey or experimental situation. And the last, to sample respondents' opinions as in doorstep interview. Next is types of interview. There are four many kinds of interview that we discuss here that might be used specifically as research tools. The first, the structured interview. The structured interview is one in which the content and procedures are organized in advance. That means the sequence and wording of the questions are determined by means of a schedule and the interviewer is left little freedom to make modification. Where some leeway is granted to the interviewer, it too is specified in advance. It is therefore characterized by being a closed situation. Next, the unstructured interview is an open situation having greater flexibility and freedom. As Kerlinger in 1917 notes, although the research purpose governs the question asked, their content, sequence, and wording are entirely in the hands of the interviewer. This does not mean, however, that the unstructured interview is a more casual affair, for in its own way it also has to be carefully planned. Next is the non-directive interview, as a research technique derives from the therapeutic or psychiatric interview. The principal feature of it are the minimal direction or control exhibited by the interviewer, as the freedom the respondent has to express her subjective feelings as fully and as spontaneously as she chooses or is able. Moser and Carlton in 1977 argued that respondents should be encouraged to talk about the subject under investigation and to be free to guide the interview. with few set questioning or prefigured framework. The interview should prompt and probe praising for clarity and elucidation, repressing and summarizing where necessary, and checking for confirmation of this, particularly if the issues are complex or vague. And the last is focused interview. The distinctive feature of this type is that it focuses on a respondent's subjective responses to a known situation in which he or she has been involved and which has been analyzed by the interviewer prior to the interview. The interviewer is thereby able to use the data from the interview to substantiate or reject previously formulated hypotheses. Planning interview-based research procedures. The first is thematizing. The preliminary stage of an interview study will be the point where the purpose of the research is decided. It might begin by outlining the theoretical basis of the study, its broad aims, its practical value, and the reason why the interview approach was chosen. There might then follow the translation of the general goals of the research into more detailed and specific objectives. This is the most important step, for only careful formulation of objective at this point will eventually produce the right kind of data necessary for satisfactory answer to the research problem. Next is designing. There follow the preparation of the interview schedule itself. This involves translating the research objective into the question that will make up the main body of the schedule. This needs to be done in such a way that the question adequately reflects what it is the researcher is trying to find out. It is quite usual to begin this task by writing down the variables to be dealt with in the study. Next is interviewing. It is crucial to keep uppermost in one's mind the fact that the interview is a social, interpersonal encounter, not merely a data collection exercise. Indeed, the file in 1996 suggests that an interview follow an unwritten script from interaction, the rules for which only surface when they are transgressed. Hence, the interviewer must be at pains to conduct the interview carefully and sensitively. Kivel adds that as the researcher is the research instrument, the effective interviewer is not only knowledgeable about the subject matter, but also an expert in interaction and communication. The interviewer will need to establish an appropriate atmosphere such that the participants can feel secure to talk freely. This operates at several levels. Next is transcribing. This is a crucial step in interviewing, for there is the potential for massive data loss, distortion, and the reduction of complexity. Our transcription receives the translation from one set rule system to another very remote rule system. As the file in 1996 suggests that prefix trans indicates a change of state of form. Transcription is selective transformation. Therefore, it is unrealistic to be pretend that the data on transcript are anything but already interpreted data. As Geffel remarked, the transcript can become an opaque screen between the researchers and the original live interview situation. Hence, there can be no single correct transcription. Later, the issue becomes whether to what extent and how transcription is useful from the research. Next is analyzing. Once data from the interview has been collected, the next stage involves analyzing them, often by some form of coding or scoring. In qualitative data, the data analysis here is almost inevitably interpretive. Hence, the data analysis is less a completely accurate representation, but more of a reflexive, reactive interaction between the researchers and the contextualized data that are already interpretation of a social encounter. Next is verifying. One main issue here is that there is no single canon of validity. Rather, the notion of fitness for purpose within an ethically defensible framework should be adopted. giving rise to different kinds of validity for different kinds of interview-based research. And the last is reporting. Reporting. The nature of the reporting will be decided to some extent by the nature of the interviewing. For example, a standardized, structured interview might yield numerical data that might be reported succinctly in the tables and graphs, while a qualitative, word-based, open-ended interview will yield more words-based accounts that take up considerably more space. Group interviewing. Watts and Abbott in 1987 have considered the advantage and disadvantage of group interviewing as a means of collecting data in educational research. The advantage is the potential for discussion to develop thus yielding a wide range of responses, and this advantage is one respondent might dominate the interview. Arske and Knight suggest that antagonism might be stirred up at the interview. Interviewing children. Eder and Finderson in 2003 report the successful use of a high-status child as the interviewer with a group of children. Group interviewing with children enables them to challenge each other and participate in ways that might not happen in a one-to-one adult-child interview and using language that the children themselves use. Lewis in 1992 found that a 10-year-old understanding of severe learning difficulties was enhanced in group interview situation. The children challenging and extending each other's ideas and introducing new ideas into the discussion. Focus group. Focus groups are contrived settings bringing together a specifically chosen sector of the population to discuss a particular given theme or topic where the interaction with the group leads to data and outcomes. Focus groups operate more successfully if they are composed of relative strangers rather than friends unless friendship, of course, is an important criteria for the focus. The non-directive interview and the focused interview. The non-directive, characterized by a situation in which the respondents are responsible for initiating and directing the course of the encounter and for the attitudes they express in it. Focused interview. The method that introduces rather more interviewer control in the kinds of questions used and sought also to limit discussion to certain parts of the respondent experience. Productive and unproductive interview material can be distinguished briefly. They are as follows. The first, non-direction. Interviewer guidance should be minimal. The second, specificity. Respondent's definition of the situation should find full and specific expression. The third, range and scope. The interview should maximize the range of evocative stimuli and responses reported by the subject. And the last, depth and personal context. The interview should bring out the effective and value-laden implication of the subject responses to determine whether the experience had central or peripheral significance. It should elicit the relevant personal context, the idiosyncratic association, belief, and ideas. Telephone interviewing. In the telephone interviewing, there are some differences of opinion from several figures. According to Arske and Knight in 1999, telephone interviewing can be detrimental to both parties. But according to Dicker and Gilbert in 1988, Nias in 1991, Oppenheim in 1992, Brock and Gall in 1996, Soknezi et al. In 2003, Ed Choi in 2003, telephone interviewing has several attractions. According Harvey in 1988, Oppenheim in 1992, and Miller in 1995 consider that the first, telephone interview need careful arrangements for timing and duration, typically that they are shorter and quicker than face-to-face interview. A preliminary call may be necessary to fix a time when a longer call can be made. The second, The interviewer will need to have ready carryable prompts and probes, including more than usual closed question and less complex question in case the respondent dries up on the telephone. The third, both interviewer and interview need to be prepared in advance of the interview if it is potential is to be realized. Fourth, sampling requires careful consideration using, for example, random numbers or some from or stratified sample. And the last, sampling requires careful consideration using, for example, random number or some from or stratified sample. In general, however, many of the issues from standard from of interviewing apply equally while the telephone interviewing. Ethical issues in interviewing. Three main areas of ethical issues. The first, informed consent. The second, confidentiality. The third, the consequence of the interview. In addition to the three important points in the ethical issues in interviewing, the personal safety of the interviewer must also be important. Okay, I think that's all. Thanks for your attention. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.